You're listening to Graphic Novel Explorers Club podcast, an audio book club.
All right, thanks for checking out today's episode of Graphic Novel Explorers Club. I'm one of your hosts, Johnny, joined by
Dennis,
and our special guest host,
November.
This episode is part of our summer special, so this is the first one of the summer special. And today we're discussing, well, you jump in and do that, Dennis.
we're discussing Spill Zone, as chosen by November. It's by Scott Westerfeld. I've actually never heard of the guy before. I looked him up. He's a young adult author, also known for, and very proud of, I should note, some choose your own adventure Powerpuff Girl books.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, we hope you've already read today's title because all three of us have read the book. So beware, spoilers ahead. We would love to hear your opinions and thoughts about today's book. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at GN Explorers Club. Leave a comment on Facebook or email us at gnexplorersclub@gmail.com. There's a lot of G's in our pre-roll here. Graphic Novel Explorers Club is available on iTunes, Stitcher, and wherever podcasts are available. November, you're a cosplayer here in Sacramento, right?
Yep.
And how'd you get into that?
Just going to a convention, seeing people dressed up, and I thought it was awesome.
What was your first convention?
SAC Anime.
Oh, okay. That's the one in the convention center, right?
It used to be in the Scottish Rite Temple when I first started going.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not there anymore? Oh, yeah, because it outgrew it, huh?
Center.
Yeah, that's right. I remember one of the first, my dad moved back up here a couple of years ago. He has since moved back to Southern California, but we were driving down that street, and he's like, what the hell is going on? And all the anime cosplayers were, just outside milling about. I'd probably taking breaks from inside the convention center or whatever. I was like, oh, it's the SAC Anime Convention. He's like, is this, what? What is that? And I was like, people dress up as their favorite comic book characters, the cartoon characters. And he was just like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. I was like, yeah, it's been around for several years. So it was his introduction to it. But so where can people follow you if they want to check out your cosplay costumes and
Any social media under November Cosplay.
November Cosplay? And do you make your own costumes?
Sometimes I'm lazy and I buy stuff.
Through other cosplayers, or is there
Both.
like, oh, okay.
There's websites and other cosplayers sell stuff. I sell stuff when I'm done with it.
Oh, really?
I actually have 2 Negasonic suits that I'm trying to sell right now.
Which suits?
Negasonic Teenage Warhead.
Oh. I only know that because of
Deadpool.
Deadpool, yeah.
That's exactly where she...
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm heading to Comic-Con next month.
Right
Ooh,
on.
down in San Diego.
Yeah.
What's your costume?
I'm probably going to wear Lady Deadpool.
Oh, awesome.
All right, so for the listener, we had to stop real quick because we had a mic stand issue. But November, you were saying off mic that you and your husband met and started cosplaying. Did I get that right or no?
No, we met in high school.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
And I started cosplaying, and years later, I finally got him into it last year.
Oh, what does he like to go as?
Well, we did Overwatch because he's really into that video game. So
Right on.
he did Lucio, and I was Diva because they're a couple. and then we have a Spider-Man suit for him that he wears, and he's going to bring it to Comic-Con. And then we have a Frozone, and I have one of the Incredibles girls.
Mom or Elastigirl or
I can do either.
Violet?
I prefer being Violet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But he does not like being Frozone.
Oh, how come?
He says he has the worst outfit out of all of them for several reasons.
It's very vibrant.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
It's just white
aqua
and blue.
and white. Yeah.
Yep.
So you chose today's book,
I did.
and what was the reason behind it?
So at Free Comic Book Day at Empire's Comics 2 years ago, I got Spill Night, which was the one-shot prequel to this.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such an interesting story that I had to buy Spill Zone when it came out. And it was so interesting. And we'll get into that in just a bit, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it started off as a web comic, which is interesting, and he was releasing it page by page. And
Oh,
then he
almost
compiled
like Charles Dickens back in the day when they would do the
the
serial.
little-
Yeah,
in the newspaper,
Yeah,
right.
it would just be like a page or two at a time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But unlike the other webcomic that we read, there wasn't anything unique about
The Emily Carroll book. Through the Woods,
exactly
yeah.
where the Through the Woods kind of utilized the long version of the page. We read a horror comic, and then as you scroll down, it kind of was an element of the page itself. This was just a straight up page, but it doesn't detract from the story regardless.
Cool. Well, have at it, Dennis.
All right. Well, the book opens up. We get introduced to the character of Addison, I believe her name is, and she's kind of doing sort of an 80s montage of like getting her equipment on and putting on what looks like biker gear. I wasn't sure the time period exactly. Does it state exactly?
It seems present day.
Yeah.
It's present day.
Yeah, as soon as I saw her, I could tell she's put on motocross gear.
Right.
Like
right,
chest
exactly.
plates, the shin guards, arm guards.
And then so they start explaining a little bit about the spill zone, exactly what it is, and then she grabs for some odd reason at first what appears to be like her little sister's Raggedy Ann doll.
Yeah.
And then she decides to her sister's name is Lexi, by the way, and then she takes off on her motorbike, and it kind of explains a little bit about the spill zone, and it's being guarded by the National Guard. It's being protected. Apparently some disaster happened. This is the only contention I will have about the whole story, at least so far. Maybe it gets explained later on, but I never understood. So she says that they're allowed to live within a certain perimeter of the spill zone because they were grandfathered in. But I would think, regardless, if some weird nuclear explosion or paranormal activity happened, I'm pretty sure the government would say just get the fuck off the land. They wouldn't.
I don't know. Yeah, it's
I think for them it's because, as we'll find out later, they're by themselves, the girls.
yeah.
Right. It's
And
just
and there
their
seems to be,
family
like,
owned that.
right.
one neighbor like in somewhat close proximity, but you never know much more than just the two sisters and then a neighbor. I forget her name, but yeah. And what it reminded me of was Chernobyl.
Right.
When we
That's
were
exactly
kids.
what I thought about.
And I thought kind of along the same lines of like, wouldn't the military just exclude like the area and then probably like a 10-mile radius around that area too? You know, like, nope, sorry, you got to move. So
Right. And so at this point, I'm not really sure how I feel about the story. So it talks about how she's kind of gliding in. She's not trying to make a lot of noise. She accidentally runs into some guards that she wasn't aware are there, but she's zipping by so fast they don't even know what she is.
well, and the motorcycle's not on too.
Right, exactly.
Did you say that?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Now, can you do that as a motorcycle rider? Can you actually
Yeah,
have...
it's just like a car. You just put it in neutral.
Oh, really?
And it'll coast. I mean, it weighs a lot less than a car, so basically you just got to get a running start and jump on the bike, and it'll
okay.
Or if she had started it, and as soon as she got to the crest, just turn the bike off, the momentum would carry you down. And it's not like a car where you have, the power brakes or anything like that. It's just
Right, totally. So as a result of the crash, she kind of has to coast into town and then walk the rest of the way.
and she smashes through the guards.
Right.
and one of the guards seemed to recognize her too.
Well,
Or yeah, sorry, that comes
Right.
into play later.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And so finally she gets into town, and this is where it starts. I'm starting to become more interested. So the town is technicolored. It's nighttime, but there's a lot of technicolor going on, and you start meeting what she regards as meat bags, which are the civilians who were caught up in the accident at the time. It's very vague as to what had happened to them, but essentially they're kind of just floating around like balloons.
Yeah. It seems like it's a Twilight Zone-esque area where physics, the law of physics, don't really apply to things, because you see symbols of like the infinity sign. It's like trash caught into the infinity sign, and you see that, and it's all kind of pointed in a central direction.
Right.
Like everything seems to be like magnetized towards the middle of town. Or
There's
the
definitely some
hospital.
kind of weird paranormal stuff going on. She talks about the meat bags, and she doesn't touch them. She has several rules that she goes by. One of them is don't touch any of the bodies.
Don't get off your motorcycle.
Don't
Don't
take
get-
pictures of them.
That's actually a personal rule that's interesting. We find out later that she's doing this because there are certain kind of macabre collectors of the spill zone, and so they like to have photographs of creatures in there and everything. But one of the things, I'm not sure if it's 100% out of respect of the dead, or she feels like maybe something bad will happen, but she doesn't take pictures of the dead there. Also, it seems like some of the animals are also possessed.
Well, I don't know if they're dead per se, because
Right.
they're floating off the ground, and they're like, they have no pupils, and you can't see the inside of the mouths, but like
They're
yellow.
like jack-o'-lanterns.
Yeah, it's like yellow, like a yellow aura is coming out of their mouth and eyes.
And that's what she said at one point. She says, I hope that they're not alive anymore.
Right. They're
That's
just
right, yeah.
vessels for whatever is seeing through them. And then it appears that other creatures are also possessed in terms of animals, especially the rats who are.
But they move.
Right, they move, and they're the dangerous ones. And other creatures do too.
And they're like stacking stones.
Right,
little rats.
And they'll chase you. And then there's other areas of the spill zone that are interesting where, like you talked about the infinity symbol, weird stuff is happening where there will be like, I think, some kind of hose that's going in angular directions, and then pinball pins in weird shapes. And then finally she gets chased by what looks like some kind of crazy wolf creature. And she's never captured this before. So
it's tall too. It's
Yeah.
It's like its limbs got stretched out.
And I'll have to say at this point, I'm slowly buying into this world. The meat puppets really got me. I like the idea of the rats. And then when we saw this wolf-like creature, that kind of sold me. I like the character design on it a lot. It's very angular. It's very angry. It's like full of electricity almost. Yeah. And it starts chasing her. All right. So the creature design really sold me. And so I'm really into this. And then she starts booking it. And then you soon learn that not all the rules are consistent throughout the entire town. She enters what's basically what she calls like the flat zone, I think. And that's really interesting where everything is there is flat. And if anything...
Yeah, it's like two-dimensional.
And if you touch anything there, then suddenly...
You become part of it.
Right.
See,
and you suddenly melt into that.
So, November, you said you read the prequel.
Yeah, and I was about to just say something
Is the flat
about
zone
that.
explained?
No, but they actually do sort of show an example of it actually happening in the prequel. It was to a dog. So in the prequel, Lexa, it's actually all from Lexa's point of view.
That's the little sister,
The little
right?
sister.
Yeah.
So she's at home all by herself, and she's with her doll, and she can talk to her doll. And you think it's an imaginary doll, an imaginary friend talking to her. And her parents are gone at the hospital because their parents one was a nurse and one was like a
Yeah, dad's
ER.
the nurse, mom's the paramedic.
Paramedic, thank you. And sister left that night. She went off and snuck out. She was supposed to be babysitting. She snuck out to go hang out at like a bar with her friends.
Oh, okay.
And so she's home all by herself, and all this crazy stuff is happening. And she looks out the window, and one of the first things that you ever see, because you see like colors out in the city, but you actually get to see like one of the first things that happens is there's this like puddle, and a dog like puts his paw into it, and the next scenes you see it start melting.
Oh no!
Into it.
Okay.
So I think that was like some of the beginnings of the flat zone.
Okay. Yeah, because my little thing about the book was how would she know that unless she witnessed it? Did the what's the older sister's name again?
Addison.
Like, did Addison witness somebody being flattened, or is this?
Well, in the scene as she's getting chased, we do get to see her helmet touches one of the things, because when she crashes her bike, her helmet flies off, and her helmet touches something in the flat zone, and that melts into it.
Oh, see, I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of a small, you can miss it detail, because everything's so exciting and happening so fast, you can skip it.
Yeah. I will say that's one of the really good things about the book is when the tension ratchets up, when she's in danger, it really, you're like, oh, God, I kept flipping the pages because I wanted to see how she got out of the situation.
So I've read this book like 3 times, and every time I find something new, like I actually didn't notice the helmet until this last time, like the 3rd time I read it.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
That's like the limo. I'm jumping ahead here. There's a scene where a limo's following Addison, and I went back and flipped. I was like, sure enough, he planted who's the illustrator? We didn't.
Oh,
Alex something?
Alex Puvilland.
Okay, yeah. You see the limo several panels back in as it's following her. So sorry. It's okay. So she's running through the danger zone.
Right, and
Highway
then
to the danger
this
zone.
weird creature's chasing her, and she's actually before that, I should preface, she's putting herself directly in danger to get certain action shots. She's never seen this creature. She knows that this is something that her buyers would want. So she's waiting to the last minute before she books it out. So she books it out. She crashes. As November explained, her helmet flies off and starts melting into the pavement. She must have had previous experience to know this, because this isn't her first time knowing that you're not supposed to touch anything. And I would assume even if her wheel clipped anything, it would start melting in there. So then it basically ends with her basically escaping minus her helmet, and the creature basically screaming at her. And then it cuts.
And it seems to be saying
one of her rules is don't listen too closely to what the animals say, because then it'll start sounding like words. And so at the end there, it was interesting that they start making it sound like the animal saying her name.
It really does. Yeah, I guess we should go over the rules. I think I wrote them down quickly. It says basically, don't take pictures of the dead. Let's see. Don't stare at the lights in the storm drains because they'll give you nightmares. And I guess she already experienced
that. Yeah.
Stay away from factories because of the rats. Don't listen to cats too closely because they'll start sounding like words, but I think that applies to any kind of creature. And then don't mess with the zone's projects, which is the like you talking about the infinity symbols and any kind of weird stuff that's happening. And then finally,
Never get off the bike.
right. Thank you.
And don't go in the buildings, which
Yes.
was always an unspoken
Right.
rule.
Exactly. And which is kind of like reminded me of I Am Legend, where what's his name doesn't ever go in the buildings.
Will
with-
Smith?
Will Smith doesn't go in the buildings with the.
You guys mentioning the movie when you should be mentioning the awesome book?
Or the other awesome '60s movie starring Charlton Heston.
Oh, but that's Omega Man. That's
Omega Man.
so fucking
That
cheesy.
that is an awesome movie. How dare you?
I know we're sidetracking here. I love in the movie when he just gets out for no reason and just he has that like British machine gun with the
Right.
side clip
Mhm.
and just starts mowing everybody down. No, he's not in any danger. It's just it reminded me of when I saw that he was an elderly man.
Right.
He was the NRA
Right.
spokesman or whatever. I was like, oh, this was probably the movie that pushed him into being the NRA spokesman because he just got out, just like mowed animals down. Oh, I'll go for it. Yeah, so no, go for it. Or I should say animals, creatures. Okay, so go ahead. Sorry.
So then it cuts from that scene to basically the real world, so to speak. And it's obviously this lady's a collector of the work of Addison's. And then I forgot her name.
Well, you're in this it's a very abrupt change because all of a sudden you're not in a rural area. You're in this. You know what it reminded me of when he flips the light on? When you go into the haunted mansion at Disneyland and the room extends.
Right.
The holding room before you go onto the actual rides and all the paintings stretch. That's what that reminded me of was when you meet this Korean man and. Well, at the time you don't know he's Korean,
Right.
And then this black woman,
Right. Tanea Vandersloot is her name. So
That's a very regal.
I know.
Last
I think
name,
Vander is like
anything.
Yeah, exactly. But she's apparently a collector. It's so 1%, right? Like you're gonna take a tragedy and then like collect kind of macabre photos. And she's very interested because apparently this had happened in another country. We find out later, Korea.
North Korea.
Yeah,
North Korea.
North Korea, to be
And they weren't afraid of basically sending regular people in and being melted into. They had their own flat zone. They had their own creatures, goats. They didn't have as many.
It was a more confined area,
Right.
right?
It was a remote village, but they did send in some of their own units, and there's I think a vivid description.
Well, America did the same thing after World War II, where they would detonate bombs in Nevada,
Right.
and they would have soldiers just sit around,
Oh, yeah.
because they wanted to see what unbeknownst to the soldiers, they wanted to see
The
what the
radiation
long-term
effects.
health effects would
Right.
be of being in a fallout zone.
So she's pretty excited because she has copies now of meat bags, essentially, and she doesn't normally have those, so she obtained some copies from the Koreans. They're apparently working out a deal where she's going to, I think, utilize Addison, who's her primary contact, unbeknownst to Addison, for the photographs and obtain something from the American spill zone that the Koreans are very interested in. So.
Yeah, you come to find out, skipping ahead, that this Vandersnoot has been buying all of her photography.
Right. So she's kind of gets a little lost, and eventually she finds her way to the hospital where her parents were. And I think this is primarily the reason why.
I think you're skipping ahead here because eventually what happens is you meet her buyer.
She's still in the zone, and she's
No, but Addison, you meet Addison and her
right
and her go-between.
Right, but we haven't met him yet. But she's on the outside, and she's taking pictures of one of the projects of the spill zone, which is, I think it looks like, oddly enough, straight jackets.
It's like a clothing tornado.
Yeah, exactly. And I start realizing why she doesn't want to go into the buildings, partially because you realize, well, her parents were working that night, and so she, saving herself the trauma, which I can only imagine, of seeing your parents, floating around like dead husks.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't go into the buildings. It's partially, I'm sure, for her safety, but
Mental safety.
yeah, exactly. then it cuts, to her back at her house, talking to her sister. Now, at this point, November, I don't know about you, but I was a little confused because you start seeing that the doll is talking and the sister's talking in her head. She seems to be mostly mute. She occasionally says words to Addison, but Lexa...
She doesn't say any words to her.
Eventually.
Up until eventually, point. But like at this point...
It's just pointing.
So I feel like
it's her thought bubbles.
This is a good point to talk about Spill Night.
Okay, yeah,
Spill
go ahead.
Okay, so in Spill Night, she has to get away from her house. She's trying to escape.
The little girl.
Mm-hmm, she's trying to escape the city. So far as we know, she can. In Spill Night, she was already kind of like talking to her doll, sort of. It was kind of a new thing. So she ends up leaving, and the doll says that she has some friends, and on her adventures out, they end up meeting a group of other kids who also have dolls.
Is this where that bus thing comes into play later?
Yeah,
okay.
and so they all end up getting in a bus, and they end up at the end of, I'm kind of skipping ahead, they get out of the city on this bus. And as later on they'll talk about, nobody knows who actually drove the bus.
So even in that prequel, they still don't address that?
Not really.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I'd have to reread it again because it's been a while since I read it, but I don't think...
And the doll...
I'm almost thinking it was...
Like the dolls... So when the little girl talks... And she's not really little. She's 12. Like
There's something going on connected with the spill and the dolls.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's like something supernatural where they have this connection with the children.
Okay.
And all of the children from that night ended up coming out different after that.
And they all had dolls, like
They
you said.
all had
And
dolls.
and when the doll speaks, it's a black dialogue bubble with red
Right.
lettering. And it's like real jagged. And when the
And
little...
she's very like abrasive and kind of crude.
Right.
Like the initial impression I got was, oh, this is the little sister's. She's so traumatized by what happened. She's actually talking, but she's saying it as the doll. Like that's her way of communicating and expressing herself. And the doll gives her the freedom to be a little curt or rude or snarky. Because the little girl, when she's thinking, you see what she almost counters what the doll has to say. She'll say like, "No, you shouldn't say that," or "No, that was rude."
Right.
But her thoughts, it's her thought bubble, and it's in yellow.
Mm-hmm.
It's like in a different, completely softer color.
Well, and then I thought at first it was just the girl just kind of talking to herself. But I guess she makes Addison take Veserptine, the doll's name, with her for kind of good luck protection or whatever. And it's at that point that I realized that the doll has more aspects to it because the doll is telling Lexa things that only she would have known if she was in the spill zone because they ran into one of the creatures. And I think
Yeah,
it
oh,
mentions-
that was a good point.
And
Yeah.
she also does say like, did she get you recharged? She
Right.
had to get back into the spill zone to like recharge something
Right.
about her
It's
that gives
very-
her her power.
Right, right. So this ends basically chapter 1 of the book. We're still, I don't know how many chapters are in here, but
I think
chapter
there's
1.
3. 4? Is there 4?
Might be 3 or 4.
So this brings us to the end of chapter 1 of the book, and I have to say I'm really vested at this point in the story. It's interesting. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel, to be honest. I was like, I've seen this before. I've seen Stranger Things.
I just watched Annihilation the other day, and that's what it reminded me of.
Right. I've seen these kind of stories, but I don't know. There's something about the way it's being brought up, and we've talked before, Johnny, about this, and I don't know how you feel about this, November, but sometimes I just got finished watching Westworld, and sometimes the writers get so wrapped up in like, we're going to build up this great mystery box, but it doesn't pay off, and I feel like there's too, like, into their own creations.
It's like the Lost syndrome.
Exactly. And then it gets confusing, and it's just confusing for confusion's sake, and it doesn't really pay off. I feel like there's just enough dribbles of the story that I'm very interested. I want to know more about the spill zone. I want to know more about what's going on here so far. So chapter 2 starts off, we're at a government checkpoint. Addison's trying to get her motorcycle out for repair.
And the troops are talking about it's one of those things where they're making
telephone. Yeah,
they're making things worse than they were. Like, it was a 10-foot bear. No, it was a jaguar. No, it was this. When really it was just Addison that blew through the checkpoint earlier in the story, what we were talking about, where she was silently running her bike.
Right, and so she smuggles her broken bicycle in her truck. She runs into an old friend. What's his name?
Because that's what they're looking for, is something. They're looking for a motorcycle.
Right, exactly. Because at least the more sensible ones aren't looking for a panther or a bear or whatever.
It's the sergeant.
Right, exactly.
Of the troop.
He's kind of a douchebag.
He is a little bit, but he apparently
he's serious about his job.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, come on, guys.
Yeah.
And then
I didn't take him as a douche. I just took him as like he's.
I did later. You'll see why.
Oh yeah. Jump ahead, he goes to her house later.
Yeah. Right.
I didn't take that as douchiness, as more as like
he
legit
forced
concern.
his way in.
Yeah, but he did
out of concern.
I don't think it was like a nefarious thing. I think he's legitimately concerned about Addison and her safety.
I know. I'm just rooting for the girls because they need the money.
They do.
Without spoiling anything, November, let me ask you, how much have you read past this book, and how much is there?
I haven't, because I'm waiting for the next
volume.
Okay,
Okay, I saw volume 2 out there, and I'm not sure if it completes the story or not, so that's interesting. So Corporal Wiley, that's his name.
Okay.
So anyway, he apparently has, he's one of those hometown boys, and he apparently has a previous, not necessarily relationship, they could just be friends, but he has previous interactions with Addison. And so she just kind of says, can you just let me go through? And they look through her car and they don't see anything. Fortunately, she's buried her motorcycle.
Well, there's a dead deer back there.
Right.
And
to gross them out.
Right.
Yeah, and it's like completely gutted.
Mm-hmm.
And they all freak out. And they're like, you shouldn't be taking animals out of the zone.
Because they know what happens in the zone. Weird stuff happens.
Yeah, so they choose not to search through the truck any further. And her motorcycle's under like a bunch of garbage in a tarp.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm still surprised. That's the only thing that bothers me, is that the restrictions around this area are so loose. I mean, they just have these perimeters, but if they're worried about a deer could just hop right over.
I wonder if they're just loose with her because they know her.
That's true. So anyway, Addison drops off her bike and brings her repair bill to her, basically her contact, her middleman.
The dealer.
We'll just call him that because I don't remember his name.
Yeah.
Marty's his name. And, she shows him the amazing picture of the wolf-like creature. He's, like, ecstatic. He takes, like, a 30% cut of whatever she sells. And he offers, to pay for the motorcycle
And he's a little Weasley because he keeps trying to grab the photo.
Right.
And she's like, nope, I'll show it to you again, but hands off.
And, he's clearly Weasley because does he have a ponytail? I feel like he has one of those balding... like Picard cuts with the ponytail. It's always he looks like your typical Weasley scummy kind of dude.
He reminded me of...
That's like it came out of the 80s.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Is he reminds me of the ticket scalper from Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Yeah. And he just smells like really bad, like cologne.
Wears too much Drakkar.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, Drakkar. Too much Drakkar. Thinks he's really slick.
Pierre Cardin.
Yeah, exactly.
He still wears bikini brief men's underwear.
Absolutely.
The Calvin Klein.
Absolutely. So they're negotiating, he says that this is going to be really good and, this will be great. I'll pay for your repairs, et cetera, et cetera. So she basically takes off. She notices she's being followed by, I think, a limousine.
Black limousine.
It cuts to a brief flashback about the school bus, like you mentioned in the prequel.
And they talked about how they wanted to take Lexa away for testing.
Right, exactly.
And she said no.
And then suddenly she's basically confronted by Vandersloot, Ms. Vandersloot, and it goes against all her protocols. She has these rules. So she's being followed by the limo, and eventually... she gets...
Well, you were saying she broke one of her rules.
Right, she broke her rule. Well, she didn't break the rule. Marty broke the rule, and Miss Vandersloot broke the rule.
Oh, no, she did, because she tapped the phone that she gave to Marty.
That's right. Marty was an idiot and basically got the nacho as a present. I'm not nacho, sorry. I'm sorry.
November's eating
nachos, and I was thinking about it. And that's all I could think about was nachos on
Marty
my mind.
loves nachos.
Nachos. I'm just making up stuff now.
And everybody knows if you want to track somebody, you track them through their nacho consumption.
It's because what you do is you put the bug. It's well known. I think it was in Predator, where they put the bug in like
the cheese,
and then you eat it. And then that's how the Predator was able to come down.
Yeah.
So Miss Vandersloot smartly bugged the phone that she gave
And the nachos.
that she gave Marty. And then so she was able to follow them, and then I guess listening on the conversation. So she basically offers Addison twice the amount of money she normally offers Marty, which turns out to be way more than Addison thought she was getting, which is pretty stereotypical in the trope.
She was paying Marty separately for the painting or the photos. Mm-hmm. She was paying him completely separately, and then expecting him to give the full amount to.
Minus his cut.
Minus his cut. She understood there was a cut.
But he was taking more than.
But yeah, he was.
It would be something like, I think she was giving him, Marty, $15,000, and he was supposed to take 30% off of that.
No, I think I took that he was being paid completely separate and then he was supposed to give a full amount to Addison, and he was double dipping. He was like, "Oh, I've got this money, and I'm taking 30% from her."
I was thinking he was just offering her less money. So he would say, "See, that like he was supposed to get 30% of 15,000, but then he would talk to Addison and say, "Oh, I only got 10,000." So that
either way, he was
either way he was basically more money, and so Addison's pretty pissed about this, and
punches
so now
him
she's obviously working for the lady.
Yeah, she knocks him out. Or doesn't knock him out, but she punches him. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So then it cuts back to Addison and Lexa's house, and it's clear now, super clear at this point, that Veserptine, is that how you pronounce it? Veserptine?
Yeah.
Veserptine? The doll has its own mind, and it's talking to Lexa, and they're snooping around, trying to figure out what's going on and looking at messages.
Well, she sent her sister Lexa a message. She sent Lexa a message saying I'm going to be home late.
Right. But I'll bring cupcakes.
Yes.
That's right. It's not nachos, so obviously that's a failed attempt.
And did you mention she's getting $1 million to do this?
I think she ups it eventually. So at one point, she does up it to $1 million. Yeah, so it becomes a...
Vandersnoot.
Yeah. And then this super creepy thing happens where they decide to have... kids have like tea parties or whatever, and so Lexa decides to have Veserptine have a royal dance party, and they assemble all the dolls. And at this point, I'm not entirely sure if they're sentient yet or not, or there's something creepy going on.
See, this is what is
go ahead.
I was say this is what's off-putting to me is they make it seem like she's Alexa is younger or developmentally younger than she actually is, because to jump ahead, when the sergeant comes to the house, he asks how old she is, and she says she's 12. I was like, my sister when she was 12, and when I was 12, I was kind of done playing with my toys. I didn't do imaginary dance parties and...
Right, but was your toy actually talking to you?
No, but still, it's just a weird...
I was still playing with toys.
Oh, were you?
12.
Way to fucking shame her.
Yeah.
Johnny. Way to fucking go.
But I think
I see a correlation between that and cosplay. So
she might still be because she was traumatized when she was what was it, 9 years old?
Yeah, that was the other. I was like, okay, she developmentally arrested.
Right, she could be. And she's
or just a joyful child.
And she hasn't really been around other kids or anything since this. I don't even think she goes to school right now. They never talk about that.
Right. So this is her whole friend circle. And not only that, but when they're doing that, then you notice her eyes turn yellow, which is really freaked the shit out of me. So I'm not sure if...
Oh, the sister's eyes turn yellow?
Yes.
Yeah, Lexa's.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Yes.
So at this point, I'm not 100% sure if Veserptine is independent or if it's some weird...
symbiotic.
or Lexa's making it happen.
So I think Lexa is connected to the incident somehow.
For sure.
And she's connected with her doll as well, because then when she's having this little dance party, she lets go of the dolls and they start dancing on their own.
Right.
And this is when her eyes are glowing, so it seems like she's controlling them.
Right. And then at this point, I'm not sure if Veserptine has actual independence or if it's totally Lexa and her weird Stephen King powers. All right, so then it cuts back to Miss Vandersloot's crib, and
It's like Misty Misdemeanor's house when she was on MTV Cribs.
And then basically she's laying out looks like the floor plans for the hospital, explaining what happened in Korea and how the Koreans are very interested in this because it happened to them.
She's explaining this to
Addison.
Addison, yeah.
And then she's well aware that Addison's parents were ground zero for the whole thing when people were coming into the ER and exhibiting all sorts of weird effects. And basically explained that she just needs her to simply, it's always that way, right? To simply go into the hospital and retrieve an item. So it's at this point that she explains, okay, I'm going to pay you $6,000. And then finally she ups it to $1 million and says that she just has to retrieve an item from a box that looks like one that she's showing her. And she's giving her this box to practice on how to like basically retrieve whatever this is from, I believe it's the X-ray room.
Hospital, yeah.
Yeah. And then it cuts to, back to town, and Addison has been dropped off by Miss Vandersloot, and she's slugged. She sees Marty. I don't know what the hell is Marty just wandering the town.
I'm walking here.
Yeah, and so he happens
here.
to be right there when Miss Vandersloot drops her off, and Addison, obviously being pissed off, slugs Marty. Accusing him, rightfully so, that he's been ripping her off for years, and then he wants to. These guys are stupid. So he wants to press charges. He starts yelling at Corporal Wiley that, she assaulted me, etc. And then she says right in front of Corporal Wiley, but you'll be like...
he said, I can turn you into the law at any time.
Right. And then she says, you'll be an accessory. All in front of Corporal Wiley. So I was like, you guys
he just happened to be passing by. It wasn't like he was, at attention standing there.
He was right there, man.
Oh, I know, but he was just happened to be in the area when this incident happened.
Right, but I mean, you would think Marty would be
I don't know.
aware.
When tempers are flared, you're not always in control of yourself.
Right, so Corporal Wiley inserts himself and is like, accessory to what? And like, oh, nothing. I was like, okay, nothing suspicious there. And then he asks to see what's in her box, and it turns out to be some cupcakes from New York that she's bringing Lexa.
That she promised.
Right, exactly.
On AOL Instant Messenger.
So then it cuts back to Addison's place where she's learned how to disassemble whatever device this is and take out a certain item, and then basically Veserptine seems very interested in what Addison's doing, so she basically prompts Lexa to come down and make an excuse, right? Mm-hmm. She's coaching her. Like, look, I need to be near this and find out what's happening. She actually says some words for the first time in, like, forever.
Yeah, the sister finally says something.
Yeah, and so she's shocked, and then, and then...
It's really interesting because Veserptine thinks this is a really bad idea.
Right.
Yeah,
and
she's trying to, like, talk her out of it.
Yeah, she's trying to get Lexa to talk Addison out of it, or at least, like, take her with her. Mm-hmm. And Addison, like, does not want to. This time she's like, oh, I just took your doll. I don't want to take your doll again.
Right,
Because
exactly.
she doesn't get it. She doesn't know this connection
She
yet.
thinks it's just like this
a toy.
Stupid. Yeah.
And then so she's really worried about Addison right now because she's not going to take Veserptine. And,
Which is weird to me. Like I thought the doll was so like almost a like an evil talisman, and now I'm like, oh wait, the doll's trying to protect her. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm wondering, like, I'll get into this later.
Okay.
And then
That was a little Joe Pesci-ish. Okay.
then we start the next chapter, chapter 3, and we take a short break from the characters that we know, and we cut to the airport, and basically it appears that another Korean has a younger Korean.
South Koreans have.
No, he was in
North Korean.
He was
I'm sorry,
one of
North
the
Korean. Yeah,
survivors.
sorry.
Of the village.
Yeah, they've snuck this guy into the States. So he has some sort of like. You come to find out the U.S. government is watching him, and this guy has telekinesis abilities. Like he goes out into the balcony and floats off of the balcony, and does some weird levitation stuff.
Totally. And then, so basically, Veserptine is really trying to talk Lexa into talking Addison out of the whole thing, but it doesn't change anything. And so Addison basically continues on to town, goes through, stops her bike in front of the hospital, and does what she says she's never going to do, which is basically go inside.
And get off the bike.
Get off the bike to get whatever is inside the hospital. Concurrently, good doer Corporal Wiley visits Addison's house and asks
because he knows something's up.
Right, exactly, and he wants to check in on Addison, and basically talks his way into the house. Kind of, I don't know, what do you say? He's kind of pushy with Lexa, right?
A little bit.
Yeah, and then we cut to basically Addison, again, in the hospital, trying to explore. Fortunately, there's not a lot of creatures or dead. But
Unfortunately, though, it's like a
maze.
Right.
maze.
So the weird thing is, she has got this blueprint, but all the rooms have changed.
Yeah.
Right.
And so where things should be, the room that she needs to get to, it's not there. So she's having to kind of like leave breadcrumbs for herself to get back out.
Like literal breadcrumbs.
Yeah, she's tearing paper
Yeah.
to. It's like a twisted.
And then
fun
she
house.
finally does find the room and gets to the box. And in the box, she finds out it's something really radioactive.
Yeah,
but
it's a little yellow packet or card.
Yeah, but like I forgot, on the way in, there's this woman outside the door, and she's a meat puppet, and this is like the closest she's ever been to one of them, and she's saying like wrong, and as she's leaving the room with the item, she says wrong room,
Right.
or something like that.
Yeah.
And
she has
it's
to,
very
like,
ominous.
Just to squeeze the IV bag hooked up to her knocks
like,
her
move her.
over.
Right.
Yeah.
And she's telling herself, he's not really saying anything.
Yeah.
It just sounds like it.
But it almost seems like this place is trying to help her.
That's the weird thing. And then we see that in a little bit more. We briefly cut back again to Corporal Wiley. He sees the receipt for the motorcycle. So he now knows, like, hey, wait a minute. Addison said she hasn't ridden a motorcycle in forever. Why did she have repair?
Yeah.
So he clearly knows something's up. Addison decides to try to book it out of there. Now more meat bags are saying wrong. And it's like echoing, really creepy. I'm liking the colors they're using. It's like real Technicolor, dark, moody, like oranges and in some cases purples. And then she steps outside the door, and the whole clothes tornado thing is dead.
Just falling to the ground.
Falling to the ground. But unfortunately.
No, the really interesting thing was that everything in there is scared of this radioactive
Oh, right.
device
Yes,
that she
thank
has.
you.
And she tests it by throwing it into the clothing pile, and everything moves away from it.
Right.
Yeah.
So she grabs it, and she's like, it's making her way through without touching
It's almost like elemental, like when you take if you take iron filings,
Right.
and move something through it, like under a table, how they'll all move in the direction of that. Only this one is the opposite.
Right, and so then that cat thing comes back, and it
This is a slightly different one, right? Because this is white. It almost looks like
it
it
is
has
a different
horn.
one.
And it's almost like its guts have turned into tendrils.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it ends up like grabbing her, and she thinks it's the end. She thinks she's gonna die, but then it ends up like letting her go.
And she's snapping photos too.
Yeah, she's taking pictures.
Yeah,
She's like,
just
well, might as
all right,
well.
yeah, like this is the end. I'll get some up close ones.
And so two things are interesting about this scene. It's holding like what appears to be this like, I don't know, black blob in one tendril.
Right.
And then
And she leaves it. He leaves it on her seat,
Right.
her motorcycle seat.
and then it actually picks up the radioactive thing that the other things were afraid of and hands it to her. Now it seems to envelop her as well, but then it basically just hands the radioactive cartridge or whatever you want to call it back to her and just leaves her alone. And then so
And I don't think we talked about this. It seems like the South Koreans are paying Vandersnoot or Sloot
Yeah.
to say, like, they're the ones really behind sending Addison to get this,
Yes,
this
absolutely.
radioactive
Yeah.
material out.
So basically, the whatever creature hands her the cartridge back, kind of says her name, and then books off. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't chase her like the other thing did, and then she's just left with that. She sees the kind of black blob. She throws it on the ground and kind of stomps on it with her foot, and she takes off. So she makes it back. It cuts to the North Koreans, which then shows that scene where the guy is talking about how he can smell the moon. And
Yeah, this guy with the North Korean with
survivor from the village.
Colors have like a certain feel or smell or
Yeah.
something
Right,
like that
exactly.
too.
And then he starts floating
Yeah.
in some weird way. And then as Addison's making her way back out the forest on her motorbike, her eyes are yellow, and she comments on how she feels lighter on her bike.
Everything's sideways.
Yeah, and she can smell the moon, which is like, what? Okay, something's happening here. Her eyes are yellow, just like her sister's. And then she makes her way back to her place, and obviously she has a fight with, Forrest Gump,
to
Corporal
the
Wiley.
sergeant. Or he's a corporal. I keep calling him sergeant.
Yeah. Basically you don't have any right.
He confronts her.
Yeah, it's like, I knew you were there. What's going on? And then all of a sudden, all the dolls start dancing in that royal dance like they did before.
But they were red.
Well, they were technicolored, kind of like
Yeah.
in the spill zone.
The same color scheme as this, because the spill zone almost has like a chromatic, weird pastel-y color scheme to
Right,
it.
and then at the end, Veserptine looks down at Addison's shoe and sees that little splotch. It looks like the thing that she stomped on from her seat, and she goes, "Oh, well, it looks like my betrothed has followed me."
Right, exactly.
And that's how it ends.
And she's walking on her own too. It should be
Yeah.
noted. She's not technicolored.
No.
And then end book.
Yeah.
So, so what do you think? November.
I can't remember what I was going to say earlier now.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I can't remember. Gosh, it almost seems though that like the zone is trying to help her for some reason. Like it seems like an
Absolutely.
alien something has happened. I don't know. They think it might have been like a reaction with like the nuclear power
Right.
plant.
We forgot about that part.
Yeah.
The nuclear power plant.
But it seems more than that. Definitely.
I'm confused.
Like something
at
from
this
another
point.
dimension, maybe?
Right.
Yeah, it seems to be.
It's
like
very Stranger Things like, but you don't feel at first. You assume the worst, right? Everything's hostile. Everything's
some
going to
sort
kill
of
you.
nefarious thing.
But it's
entity.
weird because that creature, despite its guts hanging out and everything, totally helped her. Knew her name.
But is it helping her for a good reason or a bad reason?
But then it left that blob thing on her motorcycle, so it's like, well, what did you do that for, too?
Was that Vespertine's betrothed?
Yeah,
And she
I know.
just stepped on it.
So, what did you think of the book overall, November?
I loved it. Like I was caught from the first one shot, and I just want to know like more like why is all this happening? It's really good.
What was your favorite part of the book?
Oh my gosh, probably when she went into the hospital because that was the thing that she feared the most, and she was breaking all her rules.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said before, the book at first I thought was going to be really tropey. We've seen a lot of this, right? This kind of
hack writing.
right, other dimension. I've seen Stranger Things. I don't know how many
Another
times. But I felt like the writing style, the way they introduced the mystery, the fact that not everything is evil. It has its own purpose. It could still end up being evil, but at least for now, it's not totally just monsters wanting to burst out your guts and attach things to your face. I feel really interested in reading the next chapter for sure. I don't know if it's on the website or not, but I know that they have another book out, and they're doing another compilation. But for sure, I like the story. The art's great. I like the use of colors. I definitely recommend this.
I like how relatable the characters are.
Yeah.
They're very real, and it's cool to kind of see Lexa's progress.
Yeah, and like Addison's whole reason for putting herself in jeopardy is
For Lexa.
For Alexa, so that they have money to live, and even when she goes into the to go retrieve the item, she tells her daughter, her little sister, if I don't make it back, you need to go over to this house and she'll help you. Like our neighbor will help you out. Her whole thing is providing for her sister.
And she does seem very grounded, like you said, November. She doesn't seem like a superheroine. She's not going to be Laura Croft. And
Yeah, she's not like rolling away and shooting guns into things.
and doing
That's a welcome change for us. Like we've read so many gruesome books, ultra violent books.
Right.
It's like this is kind of a nice change of course.
I was really surprised when I read Spill Zone because I thought, reading Spill Night, I thought the story was going to revolve itself around Lexa.
oh, good
So
point.
when I started reading this, I was like, whoa, okay, I get to see it from this, the crappy
totally
sister
different.
side, the sister who just
The
took
crappy
off.
sister.
She left her little sister at home.
That adds weight to why she's doing this, though. Is like
She
guilt.
felt really guilty.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. We glossed over the fact that her parents were at work. She had snuck out to a bar.
You didn't know that in the story, though. I didn't know that. I was like, oh, she's just the two sisters are left behind, so she feels responsible.
And she was at a bar when everything went down.
Oh,
And she
that's
saw it on
right.
TV.
That's right.
And so
Yeah.
she had to rush and try to get back.
See, I didn't see that as sneaking out. I thought she was just out.
No, she was underage.
Yeah.
So
But I didn't take it as like she snuck out. I thought it was like she was just out.
totally.
Just shows what kind of person I am. I would sneak out on both of you.
What did you think, Johnny?
I liked it a lot. I would really like to see. I hope it's resolved in the next volume. I feel like Addison is in too precarious dangers because now she's got this ability. It seems like
Right.
she's got this like burgeoning ability from having come into contact with one of the creatures in the zone. But then I also feel like she's being set up as a stoolie because if she's now doing stuff for the Korean government, Vander Snoot, Sloot, like, is going to throw her under the bus, and she could be charged with treason or who knows what else. Like, I feel like Addison's in this really, on many different levels, in this danger now. She's in a really bad spot.
And who knows what Forrest Gump's going to do, if he's going to...
I can't wait to see what the North Korean man who came over
Yeah.
Right.
Because he seems just more interested in meeting Lexa.
Yeah, and
he wants to know their
experiencing
connection.
it, yeah.
Yeah, he wants to talk to somebody else who was there.
Although he
Right.
keeps referring to... He keeps using all those propaganda terms, referring to like Kim Jong-un as the supreme leader,
If the
or
assassination as a coup d'etat, is as it was
Yeah.
told
Hey, could
from
have
there.
been. could very well have been.
Hey, grassy knoll.
9/11 was an inside job.
Oh my
no,
God. Don't.
no, I am not one of those people. I am not one of those people. Although the moon landing was faked. Well, November, where can, I know we said this at the beginning, but to recap, where can people follow you on social media, and they want to buy costumes that you've used?
I'm on Instagram, Facebook, November Cosplay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, do you go to other cosplays, like not in our area? Well, you said you're going to the San Diego Comic-Con, so never mind. I answered my own question. I'm not very smart. And Dennis, where can people follow our podcast?
Our podcast is available on Twitter and Instagram at GN Explorers Club.
All right. Thank you for listening. Thank you, November, for coming out. We really appreciate this. You're our first guest of our summer special and our first non-host, like our special guest host, the first one. And thank you to Sac City Brews for allowing us to record here. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you guys next week. We don't know what book we're reading because we're kind of spacing these out a little bit. So we'll read something.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.